So first of all, just straightforwardly, were you surprised at what happened last night?
I wasn't entirely surprised, and I think no one in the Labour Party probably should have been surprised by the result. After a day like that, a result like that, I mean, clearly now for Labour, we do have to pick ourselves up. We've got to think about the future and where we stand in our politics and what we communicate to the country about the future of our country. And I think one thing is pretty self-evident now. The policy offer that we made in this election really has got very few takers. It's a dwindling appeal. Not even our core vote really is comfortable with it any longer. We've got to reach out. We've got to be much more progressive in our politics. We've got to be much less tribal in our politics. And we've got to recraft the success we used to enjoy, where we did control and command the radical centre of British politics. And that's where we've got to get back to. And that's what's got to happen, I think, in the leadership election now.
Many people were surprised, though. I mean, you say that you weren't surprised by it, but many people in Labour thought that this was an offer that people did want, that enough people might have wanted for Ed Miliband to walk into Downing Street.
Well, we shouldn't have been surprised because we've made this kind of offer before, and it's ended with the usual predictable result in a general election. I mean, this particular prospectus is not going to command a majority of the votes in the United Kingdom going forward. So I think we've got to think again about where we see ourselves as a political party. There's a limited appetite, a dwindling appetite for the old school socialist menu which we had on offer now. And I think we've really got to be grown up now and take a long, hard look at ourselves and ask ourselves the question what sort of party we want to be. I mean, everyone in the Labour Party who wanted Ed to win, and we all did, will feel immensely depressed today because we're back to where we were almost 30 years ago.
30 years ago.
Pretty well, in the 80s. And most of us thought we'd never be there again. We'd learned all of those lessons, but apparently not. We're going to have to learn them again, and I hope we take the right course going forward. I think we've all moved on from there, and Labour's got to reflect very carefully on the lessons that we should draw from this election defeat. It's a very bitter one for us. I mean, we are now almost back to where we were 30 years ago in terms of numbers of MPs and our popular support, and I think few of us, after the successes we had in the 90s and into the 2000s, thought we'd ever be in this position again. But we are in this position again. We've got a duty to pick ourselves up, to ask ourselves some very tough questions about the sort of party we want to be. We haven't done that since 2010. And I think now is the obvious opportunity for us to take a long, hard look at ourselves in the mirror and think about the sort of offer and the sort of space we occupy in the political spectrum, because the centre is still up for grabs in my view.
So after 2010, though, people didn't confront what had happened?
I don't think we did. I think we chose a very appealing leader. I think Ed Miliband has many qualities. I'm not a detractor of him as a leader. I think he's put his heart and soul into this campaign. But our offer was, I think, a fundamentally dated one. And I think we have a responsibility, because we fight elections to win. You know, we don't fight elections to come a thunderingly good second or even a bad second. We fight to win, so we can form a government, change things. And when you don't do that, when you have such a terrible result as we have had, we must take another long, careful look at ourselves as a political party and resolve now the sort of direction we want to take in the future. I think a rehashed version of what we offered in 2015 in 2020 is going to have exactly the same result. So it is time to take another long look at ourselves and make the changes that we need to make to command the centre ground of politics, because that's where we have to be if we want to win.
What are those changes then? What should you look at?
I think there's quite a lot to look at. I think our relationship with business, our attitude towards aspiration and personal taxation, these have to be on the agenda now for another careful look. But, you know, I think it's up to the MPs and the party to decide all of this. My personal view is that we're not going to win any future election if we stand on the same ground as we did in 2015. I just think there's so many precedents for that now in our history as a political party. I don't think we need to retest that hypothesis again. We know what's going to happen if we go down this road. So I think this is a moment of clarity, I hope, for the party as a whole, and a moment of decision as to what sort of party we want to be going forward. And
yet Ed Miliband's calculation was this was not just a return to old Labour. He was offering something else. His view, and many people's view in the party, was that the centre had moved because of the downturn, because of the pressures on people's living standards and globalisation, the impact that's having. That was wrong.
I'm sure that's what he intended, but it's not obviously how the message was perceived in the country. And I think for perfectly good reasons. I don't think we lost this election in the 4 weeks of a campaign. We probably started to lose it several years ago. So I think we can have this debate. We're going to have this debate, and there'll be people with different views about the direction that we should take going forward. my only comment on all of this and these terrible results for us yesterday is that after a day like that, this is a time for us to have now the debate that we haven't been having about the kind of party we want to win and how we see ourselves winning in 2020, because we will need to change our ground if we're going to win a general election again in this country.
Do you think you can win given the Scottish results?
Scotland poses an enormous challenge. Of course it does. I don't know is the short answer to that question. I don't think anyone does, no. We've got to fight for the things we believe in, and that is our responsibility to ourselves as people of the radical centre and progressive politicians, yes, but as people who do care about the United Kingdom. And the one outcome I'm most worried about today is actually not the fate of Labour, not whether Mr Cameron has majority, small though it is. That's not really what I'm worried about. I am generally worried about where our country is. We're on the brink of leaving the European Union. We're staring the breakup of the United Kingdom in the face, and these are terrible outcomes for our country. And are we shrivelling or shrinking as a nation, or are we going to pick ourselves up and go forward? And I think Labour can lead that debate, and we often have done in the past, these sort of moments. But to do that, we've really got to be honest with ourselves and not shrink from asking some very difficult questions.
And if either of those things happen, by implication, it'll be Labour's fault.
I think that'll be a shared responsibility of all the political parties. I don't believe you could fairly say of Labour that's uniquely our fault. But we've all got a responsibility now to stand up and address these issues. Are we going to be the sort of nation we were? Are we going to be a fundamentally different sort of nation in the future? I hope we don't go down that ladder path. I want the UK to stay together. I want us to stay a vibrant, strong member of the European Union. Today, who knows?
Some people would say that it's very easy for people who had success, long fought, hard-won success with New Labour in the late 90s and 2000s. It's easy now to say, if only you stuck with the Blairite way of doing things, everything would have been okay. What would you say to that?
I think if we'd stayed on that general sort of ground, I think we would have probably done better, yes. But I think in a sense that's, neither here nor there. I think that the issue now for us is, what do we learn? How do we move forward? How do we still have a credible offer for the British people going forward? And today we're short of that credible offer, and we know that because of the results that we've had. And our job is to recreate that sort of momentum that we did enjoy in previous years, in previous elections, where we won pretty convincingly, and I think we can win again. But we can only do that, I think, now by taking a very careful look at ourselves and asking ourselves some very important questions about our nature and our characteristics as a political party.
Who do you see who you think is capable of leading that kind of process and then that kind of change?
I think it's probably time for a new generation of Labour politicians to step forward now. And I think there'll be many who will. And I hope we have a vibrant and sort of interesting election campaign for the leader of the Labour Party. I'm pretty sure we will. I don't know who's going to stand, so I'm not going to comment on individuals yet. It's for them to declare their candidacy, and we can have a look what they're going to say.
What you suggest, though, is if Andy Burnham, Yvette Cooper, two people who are very likely to be in the framework to put themselves forward, you would not think that would be appropriate. You need something completely new, not people who've been around and about the high command of Labour for 20 years.
That's just my personal view. I think both Andy and Yvette are outstanding politicians and have contributed so much to our party and also to our government and to our country. My own personal view is we probably do need a generational change now, a new generation of younger Labour politicians who can grapple with the enormous challenges that they face. And so I think we probably do need a change like that.
And of course I will try out some names on you, it's entirely up to you to do as to whether or not to come, but we expect Chuka Umunna to stand, we expect Liz Kendall probably to put herself forward, Dan Jarvis.
I think these are all very, very credible, interesting politicians who've got something very interesting to say, and let's see what they have got to say. But until they do, I'm going to keep my counsel, I think.
Would the party have won if David Milliband had won the leadership?
Again, that's a kind of sort of parlour game, isn't it?
People think about it.
Of course but it's a pointless exercise, isn't it? I mean, we are where we are. Maybe it would have been different. Personally, I'm not sure it would have affected the result in Scotland very significantly, if at all. The changes in Scotland are very profound, and we've got to come to terms with that and understand that and try and address those challenges. We can't run away from them. So I don't think fundamentally it would have been materially different. I suspect we probably would have won more seats in England, yes, than we did, and some of the results were incredibly disappointing. So It's possible, but I really think that's really neither here nor there. It's what we do now that matters most. And David Milliband, a great man though he is probably not going to be a candidate in the next leadership election of the Labour Party. So I think we can probably park that on one side as a what-if question that's of only interest to a very few esoteric sort of watchers of Labour,
Like
which
you
might
and
include you, but it doesn't include me.
In terms of just the scale of what has to be done, how realistic is this? How realistic is it that Labour could be a fighting force who could win an overall majority in 2020?
I think it is realistic. I mean, the one thing I learned my time in politics, you never know quite what's around the corner, but you've got to be ready for it. I think after the 2001, maybe even after the 2005 election, I don't think anyone quite thought that the Tories would come back in the way that they did. So, I think politics is a very difficult, unruly beast. You can't predict the future. I think it's pointless to try to. I think it is still within our grasp to come back with a credible offer and to command a majority in the House of Commons. I remain an optimist on that. But that very much depends on the decisions we take in the aftermath of this terrible result. Because you've really got to create a sense in the mind of the voters about where you are and the kind of things you believe in. Yes, you've got to then develop the detailed policy, that's all necessary. But you've really got to be clear with the country about the sort of the position you take. And it's not for the politicians to determine the centre ground. We don't decide where the centre ground, the public do. And I think it's really important that the next leader of the Labour Party understands that.
Well, that's great. Fascinating stuff. Thank you so much.